You're listening to Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. On each episode, we sit down with key industry experts to discover more about what's happening in the world of learning and development, from current trends and insights to the most valuable lessons learned along the way. Join us for a fresh perspective on all things training and the best direction forward. Here's your host, Leanne Langford.
Hi, welcome to Learning Leader Spotlight. This is the podcast where we interview the learning leaders of today to help the learning leaders of tomorrow. My name is Leanne Langford. I'm your host, and I'm the president of Training Pros. Training Pros is a woman-owned learning and development contract staffing company where we like to say, when you have more projects than people, let us find you the consultant to start your project with confidence. I'm excited today to welcome my guest. I have known Jason for a few years now. I met him when he was the president of ATD Chicagoland, and we have remained friends ever since. So join me in welcoming Jason Berry, the Director of Talent Management at Nolan Transportation Group. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Is this where you insert the fake applause? So everybody.
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
happy to be here. This is fun.
That's great. I'm so happy you could join us. So Jason, give us a high-level overview of who you are and what you do.
Okay, so you already said Jason Berry, Director of Talent Management. At Nolan, so my sales was actually in background my background was actually in sales, so that backwards, prior to getting into L&D. So where that's helped me out a little bit is in the scope of what I do here. So at Nolan, not only do I oversee the learning and development, so like your leadership development, succession planning, the annual review process, those kind of things, but then I also actually oversee the new hire onboarding and sales training as well. So I really cover like the full gamut of anything that's learning related or training related. It all falls under my umbrella. So
that's a very broad brush of areas of responsibility. Yep. Wow. And I always think that having a sales background helps you with marketing your learning and development work as well.
It does. It helps a lot. It also, I always advocate for people to, especially like young people, like if you have an opportunity to do a sales role for a little while, I think there's a great skill set to be able to be pulled from a sales background. And so it also helps a lot with, selling ideas up to the executive team and to leaders and, across the board. So, whether you like it or not, you're always selling something. So.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are great salespeople.
Great at it. Yeah.
Yeah. They just kind of gets like beaten out of them or something before they grow up. But
well, we also unfortunately grow out of those like cute faces that we have when we're tiny too.
Mm-hmm. And we also start to learn to be afraid of the word no, which
right.
4-year-old is never afraid of a no. They're just going.
Actually, it's funny you say that. One of the concepts we'll teach a lot, we like to jokingly call it like toddler qualification, where you're just constantly asking a sales, as you're selling, you're constantly asking a potential client just why? Because, why do you do that? When do you do that? Where do you do that? And just getting back that curiosity that we kind of beat out of kids when they're little. So
that's excellent. I love it. So, you said you started in sales, but you came over to learning and development. What brought you over to this field? What attracted you?
I think without realizing it, it was always kind of there in my blood. Like, I was a college soccer player and things like that. And then I coached throughout that time and for a little while after college. And I always found a little bit more satisfaction out of the coaching side of it and like seeing the team do well and some of that stuff. And then, as I got into my career, I started, always taking on like manager roles and stuff like that. And I kept realizing the parts that I really, really enjoyed was when I would get new employees and I could coach them up, or seeing them leave my team and go take another newer role somewhere else, or being promoted in that, like along the way. And so about, I guess it's been like 10 or 11 years ago now, I had an opportunity to switch from being on the sales leadership side of things to a corporate trainer. And, it was a little bit of a pay cut, but talking to my wife and just thinking about like where my passion really was, like that's the jump I wanted to make. And so jumped over, and it's all been, I guess, exactly what I hoped since. Probably more, because at that time I really liked standing in front of people and talking and teaching people things. And then it from that point kind of morphed more into like, there's more to this than just teaching people to be good at their role or sales. There's this whole leadership aspect that I have this background in, that I've had practice in, and I love talking to new leaders about how to develop that skill and relate to their new employees. And it just kind of built out over time, and probably really culminated into me really realizing that this L&D field specifically is such a gratifying one, probably like 6 or 7 years ago, somewhere around there.
Well, one of the things I've always noticed about learning and development is once you've gone into it,
Yeah.
you never leave.
No, it's what I get to show up, and even, I mean, I think we all, there's a reason we get paid to go to work, because it's work. But I think no matter what, even on a day where I would just much rather stay home or lay in bed, like I'm never dreading going into work or working on the things, even the mundane stuff. It's all going towards something that I really like to do. So it's fun.
Yeah, no, I've always had that joy of I just love the L&D space. And, as you probably know, I'm also in account management with
Hmm.
Traybrook. The only part of my job I don't like is the administrative, like
Right.
meetings and that internal meetings and things like that. I'm like, let me just go have coffee with someone. I want to go have lunch with somebody. I don't want to have administrative meetings.
Oh, 100%. If we could get paid to just do this and then meet for coffee and things like that, I don't know how we make that happen, but I'd be all for that.
Yeah, I don't know how to make that happen either. If I ever figure it out, I'll let you know.
Cool.
So, as you know, just like me, there's been a lot of changes in L&D recently. What are the most impactful changes you've seen?
So, I mean, obviously, I think the obvious ones would be, your AI stuff that's been coming on extremely strong. The shift more towards like virtual training over COVID, which I actually think is starting to shift back the other direction. And we're finding a pretty good mix between being able to do stuff like this where we can meet virtually and don't have to do it in person, but at the same time, there's a craving for in-person, face-to-face stuff that wasn't there a couple of years ago. But some of the other things I've seen, there's been, at least in, like the logistics side of things, is really being able to prove kind of the data behind what we're doing from an L&D sense. Like, how quickly can we get people ramped up? What does the turnover look like for the leaders that have gone through a leadership program versus those that haven't? Like, it used to be when I was first doing a lot of this stuff of more just like, everybody tells us they want more leadership training, so let's get something behind that. And now it's shifted more and more to also being like, are we able to show the impact of it on paper and the ROI behind it, which, can add some extra pressure, but I also really like it because one of the things that's hard to do is always just like prove that this works outside of people just saying they like it. So, and that's something I've been working on too, is like, what are some substantial ways to actually show that it's having an impact, which is cool. So,
Yeah, that's a really big shift. I mean, it's been slowly coming along, but I really feel like we've made a big acceleration on we have to hit KPIs. We have to
yeah,
meet understand what is the future state we're working towards and how do we measure that we met it.
I definitely understand why that's scary for a lot of people too, but I think that partly probably plays into like what you and I just talked about, our sales background, where I'm kind of used to having to prove the numbers anyway or hit metrics. So
Yeah. In
it's
sales,
kind of nice.
you make a difference or you
Right.
carve.
Yeah. No, you ultimately control your destiny here, and let's prove it, So
Yeah, no, it's fabulous because, I started a few years before you in L&D,
just a few.
just a few. Yeah. And back then it was smile sheets and assessments. That was it.
Right.
That's all we measured. And of course, how much it cost to put stuff
Right. Of course.
with it. But that was back before we even had e-learning, so stuff wasn't very expensive.
Yeah. I th- well, and I think this will probably play into like what I see in the future too, but one other shift I've started to see is as our teams, like I have a substantially smaller team here than I did at my last company. So there's been more reliance on, I mentioned, being able to use AI to kind of maybe replace that need for like an L&D coordinator type role, because it's taken so much off my plate in terms of like the initial creation process of like content and stuff like that. But also finding ways to like lean on leadership to help deliver some of the messages and things we're trying to do, versus it always needing to be pulled off the floor in a classroom learning. It's like, I have a smaller team, so can I build stuff out so that it's also easy for my leaders to learn it and then regurgitate it to their employees. So you end up using them as sort of your like contracted trainers almost, which has been a change too. But I honestly, it works really well.
That's fantastic. So yeah, you saying that there's a big move to going in person. Of course, AI is a big deal. Where do you see us heading in the near future? The next few years, what's L&D going to look like?
Part of what I just said, I think, obviously there's going to be exceptions here and there, but I think for now in the foreseeable future, kind of past the like really big L&D teams, I think they're going to look a lot more kind of like what my team looks like today, where I've got one L&D person that reports to me, and then I have two like sales training people that report to me, and that's the whole team, and even if we're hiring 200 people, that's the team we have to train. And then, like I said, we'll lean on the sales leaders, the sales managers to help with the training. And it's, to me, that's a big shift. And I don't really see a future where I have 13, 14 trainers reporting to me anymore, things like that, especially with some of the tools available. I think leadership development in general, the thing that always makes me happy is I feel like I hear more and more companies and executives talking about this stuff. I think part of it maybe is as we get like my generation younger up into leadership roles, and they realize the value of it, but having that become more of a ingrained part of just like a company's culture and required trainings. That seems to be more of a like structured trend that I see of not just can we get this person a subscription to Franklin Covey and have them take some self-guided learnings, but let's build out actual programs that we want all of our leaders to go through. Like that's one that I've seen change quite a bit. And we talked about it a little bit, but just that the measurement of it becoming more intentional and more focused, and really being able to prove out that this is a long-term solution that has a real impact on the actual side of the business that makes money, and realizing this isn't something that we're just investing in that doesn't have a return on it. We can actually prove that this is part of the organization that helps make money, and here's why.
Yeah, proving the value of the learning programs has definitely gone to next level at this point.
Yeah.
I recently, for about the fourth time, heard Dr. Keith Keating speaking. He's the author of Trusted Learning Advisor and Hidden Value. One of the things he was talking about is you have to understand what that executive wants to hear. Like the financial officer wants to hear something than the sales or the revenue officer, or each officer wants to hear a different story about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to speak their language, not just the language of learning and development.
Yeah. And actually, honestly, speaking of, because you mentioned subtitles in there, that's another shift I've seen, not at the like executive level, but below, where a lot of times we're looking just as much at an employee's skills as we are their job title in terms of what really kind of matters. And so I've seen more and more less of an emphasis on what somebody's title is, and more emphasis on what skills do they bring to the table, which I think that's a good trend too.
I think it's a great trend. For a while, you would see people just taking the job with the best title. And it's like, no, take the job where you're going to gain the most skills and be the most critical team member.
Yeah. 100%.
Let's shift gears for a second. And why don't you talk about who's been the most influential mentor you've had in your career?
Man, I've had a few. And like one philosophy I personally have always believed in mentorship is, it's great to have somebody obviously like in the field that can guide you and lean on their past experiences. But I've had so many mentors that weren't directly in like the field or path that I've gone in. So like my first mentor, which I guess ultimately ended up being more on the side that I'm on now, but when I was still a sales manager, I had a mentor at my last company. Her name was Tahita. That was I think her role was like director of HR or something like that. But I really liked her like outlook and approach to things. And so, just went up to her one day and was like, I don't know if you're open to taking on mentors or whatnot, but I'd love to just like start meeting with you every other week or so and just like picking your brain. And like, she was probably, when I think back to like the most impactful ones I've had, it was probably her. Just because she really helped me develop into like the leader that I am today, and my approach to things, and realizing that, an employee showing up late every day isn't a personal attack on me, and like taking things so personally, and, like those kind of things. So that's honestly who sticks out in my head first. Is a lot of the lessons I still think about today came from her. And I've told her this, but I still don't know if she fully realizes how impactful it was to spend those like really probably 3 or 4 years straight of just like talking to her at work all the time about stuff. I would say the second person that pops in my mind, which I probably should tell him this because I really haven't, but is my current boss. his name's Brian over at, he's our chief people officer. And it's been seeing just an entirely different approach that I haven't really seen from that role before. And somebody, first of all, I'll tell you, like, I being on this side of things, you tend to have a female boss, which is great. Like it's the one area in today's world where you're the minority as the male in the group. So seeing a male figurehead on this side that's so empathetic and like willing to share his thoughts, his feelings, see how his employees are doing. He doesn't try to, hide things from people. He kind of just wears his emotions on his sleeve and tells the team how much he loves them. And like, you know what I mean? It's just been like a cool example to see, and somebody that I've also been able to kind of mimic myself after and see. So those are probably the two that stand out in my head the most.
That's fantastic and very smart of you to bring up today's boss.
Right.
No, and I know what you mean. So, in our company, it's all learning and development. We've got one man in the whole company. Yeah. It's all women.
I always like to make that joke of, I'm happy to bring some diversity to the table,
Yes.
as the white male in the group.
You are the man in the room for sure. Yeah, no, when I go to these conferences, it's like women, women, women. Oh, there's a guy. Women.
Yeah.
It is a very female dominated field for sure. What do you think is the most important skill for people to have in the workplace today?
It's a good one. I mean, the one that always pops out to me first, because it's one I relied on so much, is just that ability to network and build a brand internally. I think a lot of it's going to depend on what you want to do, obviously, with your career. Like if your goal is to just make as much money as possible and be on the sales side of things or something, that the internal growth might not matter to you as much, and you just want to pound the phones or make sales and make endless amounts of money, then that's great. But if you're looking to like grow or move up the corporate ladder and kind of grow your career that way, it's very important to be able to advocate for yourself, and not be afraid to, I don't want to call it, I can't think of the right word for it, but like be able to like humbly promote yourself. You know what I mean? Like anytime I've done this for a long, long time, but I'm like notorious for BCCing my bosses on like initiatives, or if I think I've written a really good email or something like that, like I will always like over include my bosses on stuff, because how else are they going to know like all the great stuff you're doing? And that's stuff I tell my employees to do all the time of like, if you take on a project or you do these things where maybe you and I hadn't discussed it, like CC me on it or BCC me on it, just so I can't brag about you if I don't know all the great things you're doing, and it's one of those. So any opportunities you can have to meet somebody in another location, or, take on projects that maybe a little outside the scope of your role, but get you more exposure in different areas. I think that is critical, because if you can become like a name that's sticky on the tongues of people within the organization, it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for you. And it's helped me a ton.
Well, I couldn't agree more, especially in the early, first 20 years of your career.
Right.
Being able to do that is so critical. I remember my very first job, I had only been there about a year and a half, and the president of the company was like, I keep seeing you everywhere. And I was at a trade show and he showed up there. He's like, I see you everywhere. And I'm like, yes, sir.
I mean, that's exactly it. It's, at my last company, I had 10 roles in my 13 years there. And it was that kind of stuff, to just consistent growth, because my name was always at the top of the list of the ones that come up. And part of it was, of course, like I was working hard and doing good stuff, but it was also just, I was a name that people knew. And I also, I've never been afraid to be like, hey, I feel like the company has a gap here. And so I put together like a new job title or a job description, and like present it to my boss and be like, if we were going to create this role, here's the description for it. And you're looking at the guy who could fill it, and just doing stuff like that. And did it always lead to like that role being my next step? No, but it would lead to something, because those conversations were open.
Well, and definitely, you love to see people innovating at work when
Right.
you want to see, wow, somebody's not just saying this is broken. They're saying, here is the thing that we need to bring this to the next level.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
What is your favorite source for industry news and information?
I would say I have a couple. So, we'll get to your book question later too, but I'm not a huge avid like reader. But I think my two main sources are LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and like the sources themselves from LinkedIn are just the people that I follow, right? Like looking at just thought leaders in my industry that share interesting stuff and like just reading through and getting like those different perspectives. I think that's always been what's made the most sense to me, is hearing different perspectives. And that, and combining that with like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but it's not a lot of like L&D focused podcasts or work related podcasts. It's just like sports podcasts here, or, these kinds of podcasts here, but it's hearing people talk about like their experiences as a leader in something, or seeing how somebody handles certain situations. Like there's always this L&D underlying like L&D component to it that they probably don't even realize, but like you can pull good stuff from real world examples. The other one is I love to just get involved in like external groups. So like when I was chapter president at ATD, currently involved in two groups. The one's called the People Collective here in Chicago. They partner with Lucas James, the recruiting resource. And then I'm involved in I just joined this one here a few months ago, but the Executive Club in Chicago. And so again, I love to like go attend those events. The People Collective has luncheons probably like once a month, where they have, different speakers come by and talk about various leadership things. And like I always pull so much from that, because it's, it's interactive, and I get to do what I said earlier that I love to do, which is like continue to build that brand and like meet more people and make connections like you and stuff like that. So those are probably my two main sources, really, is LinkedIn and joining actual groups. Because anytime I can combine learning something with also growing my network, like I'm all in on that.
Yeah, I have a feeling if we did a personality test on you or something, you want to be around people and you're an extrovert, and so I can see that networking would be a big part of it for you.
Yeah, I just again, just having your name be on the tip of people's tongues is never a bad thing, unless it's because you're doing terrible things or something.
They say there's no bad PR.
That's true.
So that's funny. And I use LinkedIn actually daily. I scroll through my feed and just see what people are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What's on people's minds? What are they talking about? And since I'm connected very much to L&D connections, I get a lot of L&D news that way. And then occasionally I'll go, oh, let me click on that and see what they're talking about,
Yeah, and then you pop into, you see a couple of interesting links or whatever, and it's just I just like when it all comes like organically to me.
Yes.
That always hits better for me that way.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, last question, and it's the big one. What is the one book everyone who wants to be you should read?
So I think, again, I don't read a ton of books, but I think probably the most obvious one to me, the one that sticks out right away, just because, and maybe everybody's even read it, would be Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, because that's just such a good book. And she has such a good way of making things so relatable, through her experiences. And it's just stuff that you can very easily like take and apply in your day to day, like her whole clear is kind mantra, like those kind of things, where it's just nice and digestible stuff that makes sense. Not a leadership book necessarily, but I'll plug this for my friend anyway, because she wrote a book, and it's kind of in line with the stuff I like to think about that I think helps in this role. Is Erin Coupe, Coupe. She has a book that came out called I Can Fit That In, and it's just about your kind of like mentally compartmentalizing the things that you want to do throughout the day, and you always have time for stuff. It's just a matter of how do you focus that attention on what really matters versus what doesn't. And I think that's a great leadership skill, because, you get so much stuff dumped on your plate that you've got to be able to decide, this is important today, this I don't necessarily need to do, or if I want to be able to do this, then I need to spend 5 less minutes on this. And it's just the idea behind being intentional on where you want to spend your time. I think it's such an important skill that a lot of leaders don't think about that they should. So
Yeah, no, and I think it's an important skill, honestly, for any project-based office work or anything like that, because even salespeople, you have to be, I always say you have to be time stingy. You have to know where am I going to get the most bang for my buck with my time, because if you try to do everything, you'll work 80 hours a week, right?
Yeah, 100%. And then you won't leave time for, like I like to work out. I like to go grab a drink with my wife or, stuff like that, where if all I'm focused on is this one thing, you've got to make time for that stuff. Then you're actually more productive if you give yourself a break and go
Yeah,
do something that you like to do and then get back to it, So
absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that if you looked at my calendar today, you'd see I've marked several weeks in advance, gym time, different times a day.
love that.
That like I'm going to go to the gym several times a week. And if I don't put it on my calendar, someone will ask me for that time.
One thing I started doing last year that now I'm like, I like have to do it every day now is I go for a walk at lunch and just literally like 2.5 miles. Like, it's like spend 30 minutes. Maybe I'll combine it with like grabbing my food for lunch or something. But that is such a great, especially when a lot of times my days at work right now are split between like at some point I'm focusing on kind of the sales development and growth of it. And then I'm making a switch to L&D or like more leadership development type of stuff. I'll try to divide my days up. So it's like in the morning, I'm only focused on sales stuff. And in the afternoon, then I'm working on leadership stuff or vice versa. So I'm not trying to have two different brain waves going on. But man, having that just like lunch break in the middle of the day where I go for a walk has been like so healthy for my like mindset. It's such a good like refresh just to, even when it's 2 degrees outside here in Chicago, like I'll still go for a quick one just to reset,
Oh,
So
absolutely.
I become a big advocate of lunch walks.
I wholeheartedly support that. So I do a morning walk and at the end of the workday walk, but maybe at a lunch walk.
It's just been great. And that's, yeah, I get so much more done than if I try to just like power through and work through lunch and then my
I feel
brain's
like it
dead
wakes
by
your
like,
brain up, right?
yeah,
It
it's
kind of
like,
gets your brain going.
if you just power through, after like 2:00, you're not producing good work anyway. So take a break and then come back to it. And it's great.
It's a better solution than my 2 o'clock cup of coffee.
Well, I
Much
do that. I do those too, but it's okay. Yes.
good one. Okay, I love that. Well, you have been an amazing guest. I am
Thank you.
so happy we were able to do this. I look forward to seeing it on your very active LinkedIn feed because you are
Of
one of the
course.
best LinkedIn users I've ever seen.
Hey, thank you.
Um, and as my thank you to you, we're going to plant 5 trees in your name.
Awesome.
Yes, and that's our charity here at Training Pros. We've planted 5,500 trees to date. And right now we're planting trees to preserve the wetlands. So they're going to be
Cool.
things like mangrove trees that have the um, exposed roots and everything to hold the soil in.
Can I give you
Um,
a quick fun fact
yes.
because you brought up trees? A birthday present my wife got for me, I guess it was like 5 years ago now, is if you bought this little like 1 foot by 1 foot plot of land in Scotland, they planted a tree there and you officially are made a lord. And so my wife and I are technically a lord and a lady in
Yes.
Scotland. So Lord Barry. So
Yes. My husband gave me that a few years ago. I'm
yes,
Lady Leanne.
you are. See, you're just a lord and a lady talking to each other right now.
That's right. We make a joke, Lady Leanne Langford.
I love it.
Yeah. It was a very cute present. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Um, So that is it for this week's episode of Learning Leader Spotlight. Join us again next week when you'll hear from another learning leader from another industry. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us for the latest episode of Learning Leader Spotlight, interviews with corporate L&D leaders. You'll find links in the show notes to any resources mentioned on today's show. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave us a 5-star review.